Hey guys, welcome to part 2 of the Radiator fan videos. So, in my previous videos, I had thought that the power wire for the Radiator fan controller went straight to the battery. I've since figured out that that was incorrect, but I've got it resolved and I've got everything buttoned up, so I thought I would go ahead and show you guys the finished product. So the ground being, well, the three pin wire going into the controller is, again, it's 12 volt signal, ground, and the data wire from the ECU. So what happens is the ground wire just gets grounded to the chassis, like I initially said. You can kind of see it in there. So this is the original wire from the pigtail that I cut, and just with a ring terminal crimped on, like I showed before. But rather than that going straight, or the power wire going straight to the battery, like I had initially thought, it actually is supposed to get a switched 12 volts with the ignition. So apparently I was looking at the wiring diagram wrong, or looking at the wrong diagram, I'm not sure. Pulling it up again, it was really obvious that it was supposed to be switched 12 volts. But no big deal. So here's how I went about fixing this. So this is the factory fuse box, and this relay right here is your original Mirage or Evo 4, 5, and 6 radiator fan relay right there. C, letter C. So how it works and how I went about it, there is, on the bottom of this, if you take the cover off the bottom of the fuse box, right here is the bottom of the relay. And mine's going to look a little different than yours because I've already redone mine. So what I did was the original signal wire that goes into that relay, which is the small blue one there. You can kind of see it. Let me see if I can dig it out for you here with one hand. It's kind of difficult. Okay, here we go. So this blue wire, you can see, maybe, let's get a flashlight here. I have not got enough light for shooting video. Yeah, so there you go. The blue wire that goes right into there. I snipped that, and I wired that in to the red and black wire right here. And this red and black wire is a switched 12 volts with the ignition. So you can see I just cut it. Sorry, there's not going to be a good camera angle for this. I cut it and spliced it in right there. And there's a heat shrink splice in there. So like I said, red and black is switched 12 volt, comes on with ignition, so it triggers the, let's see, what relay is that? That is a horn relay. Okay, so, right? Hang on. No, I think that's headlight relay, actually. This relay here. No, that is the horn relay. Okay, well anyway, that's a switched 12 volts. I verified that. And I spliced in the original blue wire, which is the control wire for this relay. Spliced it in with that switched 12 volt. This wire here, the heavier gauge one, is the ground. Okay, now you said you spliced this end in with the switched 12 volt, but the other side of that wire goes to pin 21 of the ECU, which, as we talked about earlier, that is the actual control wire for the fan controller. So it actually worked out twice as well as I thought it was going to, because I've got that wire now switched on with 12 volts, and the other end of the blue wire that goes into the fuse box right here, I've got that spliced in with a butt splice and then heat shrunk and taped. And then that wire, like I said, goes around on this ABS this old ABS sensor wiring, and that's wired straight in to my fan controller. And this does work, so you don't even have to repin your ECU or anything when swapping to the Evo 8 ECU for the fan controller anyway. All you have to do is cut that blue wire, and then it runs straight to pin 21. So all you do is reroute that down to your fan controller, and that will be your trigger wire for your fan controller. And it works perfect. So the next thing that I did, repurposing wiring in here. For some reason, I've never actually seen this fuse slot populated right here. You can see there is one side of a terminal in there, in between that 15 and 10 amp fuse. There's one side in there, and it's not used on my Evo 4 fuse box, and it's not used on this Mirage fuse box, so I'm going to assume that it's probably a 12 volt test pin that you can use to test things. I don't need that because I've got relays, so what I did was I snipped that off. You can see the end of it down there. I snipped that, and then it goes right here on the outermost pin of that relay. And then where I had the fuse box, the fuse holder for that power wire that runs down, it runs straight to that fan control box, the blue wire on there. It's the 12 volt power wire for the fan controller. It runs straight into the center wire of that relay. And you just pick up some spade connectors, the female spade connectors, and crimp them on, and then slide the wiring in there. You have to take this little white cover off, which is kind of a pain, but that pops off with some tabs. Pull that out of there, slide your new spade connectors in there, and then pop this back on. So basically how this is working now is the original wire that triggered that fan relay comes straight from pin 21 of the ECU, which is the fan control wire, the data wire for the fan controller. So we snipped that, and instead of going into the fuse box to trigger a relay like it would on the Mirage, it now comes out, follows this piece of wiring around to this connector, and then this single wire goes down, and it's the center control wire on that fan controller. So the next thing that we've done is we've taken the original trigger wire, the other end of that we snipped off, and we've run it over to a 12 volt switched that's set up to trigger relays when you turn the ignition on. So when you turn the ignition on, this wire gets power, and it enables the horn relay, which is what it did originally, but now it also triggers this relay here for the fan controller. And all that does is trigger relays, so you really don't have to worry about overloading it by triggering 2 relays instead of 1. It just takes barely anything to make those trigger, so you don't have to really worry about overloading that circuit. The next thing we did was snip off that wire down there that went to a fuse box, or to a fuse holder, the one that, like I showed, we didn't have fuse there. And the reason we did that, you could use the stock one, but it's a lot smaller gauge. I wanted to keep the heavy gauge wiring, just because you don't want to hot wire anything by pulling too many amps through too small of a wire. So we kept the big 12 volt, we cut it and moved it over here, which is this wire right here. That is the outermost of the 2 trigger wires. That's the 12 volt constant from the battery. That always has 12 volts on it. And then this center wire right here, that's the wire that's the power wire for the fan controller. So what happens is when you turn the key on, this wire is energized right here, and this is the ground for this wire. So it goes through, energizes the relay, which closes the relay, and then this is the ground for that. And then that connects these 2 pins here together. So your 12 volt from the battery and the 12 volts that goes to the fan controller. So this will work just like a factory fan controller would. It's pretty simple. This video might make it sound complicated. I'm just showing you the way I did it because I didn't have to run any new wiring. All I did was use existing wiring and repurpose it. To me, that's the easiest way to set this up. And I think this is going to work pretty well. So, and already verified that the relay setup works like I showed, because if I take this relay out, and you can see there's the shiny new spade connectors, and you see I had a piece of wiring sitting here. I can spot where I put it. Where did it go? This is the problem with wearing a hoodie when you're working on a car. Your sleeves catch everything. Maybe it's sitting over here still. This will work. We'll use this one. Okay, so looking at the top, these two wires here are the wires that power the relay and close the relay. And these two wires here, when the relay closes, are the ones that get connected. So if I bridge those two wires, so trying to do on camera is difficult. There you go. So there you have it. And that will run at full speed with the ECU powered off. So as soon as the ECU receives power, when you put the key in, that fan's not going to kick on because that control wire is going to already be sending data to the fan controller. So from there, you can control all your fan speeds and your fan curves with your ECU. There's a fan, I think it's called the thermal fan table in the Evo 8 ECU. So you can control RPMs and everything straight from that table. And it's pretty nice solution. So anyway, I just wanted to correct that. Make sure you guys are not putting 12 volts from the battery to that fan controller, because that's not the way it's supposed to work. Again, that was my bad. I read the wiring diagrams wrong. But it was an easy fix, and it's going to be, everything works pretty well. And like I said, I didn't have to run any new wiring, so not too bad. But anyway, it is getting close to 10 o'clock, I think, on New Year's Eve. So I'm going to go spend some time with the family, and I will see you guys next year. Have a Happy New Year.